Welcome to Glenmore Lodge's Winter Navigation, the Dark Arts. In a recent study by Dr. Bob Sharp, he suggests that poor navigation was involved or contributed to almost 30% of mountain accidents in the previous 5 years. Evidence suggests that at least 2 people are killed every year due to poor navigation in the UK. There is no significant difference in the statistics between those who came from south or north of the border. For many reasons, navigating Scotland's mountains is significantly more difficult in winter than it is in summer. This can be down to numerous factors, some of which would be loss of linear features such as streams where they get covered over by snow, cornices potentially making handrailing ridges harder, shorter daylight hours restricting visibility, and increased whiteout conditions restricting visibility to almost zero. Avalanche hazard can also disrupt the natural navigational line and force you to take on more difficult strategies to get from A to B. In the Scottish winter mountains, the weather is constantly trying to disrupt you as you strive to navigate your path. Strong winds buffet you in your map, the cold reduces the battery life of your electronic devices, poor visibility affects your ability to balance and focus. It is so important to have your navigational systems accessible and easy to use, as well as weatherproof and with a level of redundancy. Your goggles, head torch become key tools to enable you to navigate effectively. Your map, compass, altimeter and GPS all need to be quick to access and safe from loss as the wind constantly tears at them. Your map needs to be in a waterproof case and accessible in a large jacket pocket that you can get to with your rucksack on. Your compass wants to be tied on so that if you drop it, it doesn't smash off a rock. It's good to have a pace counter accessible so you can count how many 100 meters of pacing that you've achieved. Your GPS wants to be handy so that you use it. I tend to put my watch in poor weather on the outside of my jacket. This helps me access it without letting the cold air out and the rain in. When faced with complex navigational challenges, it's important to have a system to organise our navigational toolkit. Think of a layered system, the base layer being the description, the storyline of your journey from A to B, the description of the world around you and what that would look like on a map, or the map and what that would look like in the world around you. Other layers, such as direction, distance and design, can be added when you require additional security to achieve your leg. Description, speaking the language of the map. Can you describe what the map looks like from the view of the ground? Can you describe what the ground looks like from the view of the map? Can you create a detailed storyline of what you will experience on your journey from A to B? So we need to speak the language of the map, but which dialect? Well, we've got several different kinds of map we can use. For me, the one in the middle, the 1 in 50,000 map, is a really solid winter map. It doesn't have so much of the detail of the 1 in 25,000 map on the right, which can be really good because a lot of that detail is covered up by snow and can be really confusing. The map on the left gives an option for those who want a clearer picture from the central 1 in 50,000 map, and it's simply a 1 in 50,000 map blown up to a 1 in 25,000 scale. The map at the centre in the bottom is a Harvey's map. It's a 1 in 40,000 map, and again, a really good winter map. One of the features I like about the Harvey's map is, if you notice in the top there, the contour lines turn grey. That happens when the ground underfoot is predominantly rocky, which tends to happen between 30 and 45 degrees of slope angle. So actually this ends up highlighting a lot of terrain that's steep enough for avalanches to start. Now, not all areas on that map of that steepness are coloured in grey, but we can use the grey areas to get a gauge of the density of contour lines that could be avalanche start zones. As a summer navigator, you'll be able to look out at a view like this and create the map in your head. You'll obviously have the big blue bit of the loch, you'll have the contour lines as they curve around the steep slopes of the valley, you'll mark the crags on and the streams, and you'll be able to create a picture like this. Hopefully this is what you visualized when you were looking at the previous slide. the big blue mark of the loch, the stream flowing into it, and the densely packed contour lines as they flowed around the valley. But now consider winter. If you were to look at a map like this, what would you expect to see in winter? So much of the detail of the previous slide has changed or even disappeared, including the kilometres long loch that's just gone. So we need to upskill our navigation. Here are some ideas. One really useful navigational tool, which is commonly neglected in the summer, is the slope aspect. The slope aspect is the direction that the slope is facing. By taking a bearing straight down the hill, you can come up with a number for the slope aspect. You can take this to an accuracy of 1 degree. You've eliminated 359 of potential 360 different slope aspects and vastly reduced the number of places that you could be. Here is an example of where slope aspects could be useful to you. You're stood on a hillside in a whiteout, but you can see the fall line where the ball would roll down the hill. You point your compass down and take a bearing, and you find this aspect to be 45 degrees or northeast. You can lay your compass on the map and look for places where the slope aspect is 45 degrees. You can see there's 3 places on this map marked with 3 blue arrows where the slope is facing 45 degrees. You know that because the contour lines are at 90 degrees to your direction of travel arrow on your compass. A quick look around you determines you to be in a shallow re-entrant, and bingo, you know where you are. Gradient can really affect us as climbers, skiers and mountaineers. When it's icy, even 20 degrees of slope angle can feel really exposed. So it's important for us to be able to measure the slope angle from the map so we can anticipate the upcoming terrain. On a 1 in 50,000 map, if we look at the thick index contour lines and how far apart they are, we can get an idea of the slope angle. 6 thick contour lines per centimetre is a slope angle of 30 degrees, 8 is a slope angle of 40, and 10 is a slope angle of 45 degrees. Other tools such as FatMap can give us an even more precise idea of the gradient of the upcoming terrain.
GPS is increasingly becoming an normal part of your navigational toolkit, and they can certainly reduce levels of stress in your day. It is, however, important to consider why you're using a GPS. If the answer is to speed up your navigation, then a GPS could be a really useful tool. If it dies, then you can just switch back to your normal nav. If the answer is, it's my backup, then that's actually really scary, because they're simply not reliable enough in this role. From running out of battery, to wet screens becoming impossible to operate, to being unable to acquire satellite signals for many reasons, I've seen many GPS simply fail to tell me where I am over the years. A spare map and compass and your ability to use them should be your backup. GPS, like the one pictured with a map, are good as they use the contours as your reference and keep you thinking about your place on the map. If you're using a phone as a GPS, it's vital you consider your battery life. Your phone is your portal to rescue, and you need power to achieve this. My personal rule is to arrive back at the car with no less than 50% battery life. Remember, rescue involves a series of phone calls, which are a large drain on the battery. There are many top tips for optimizing your battery life. For example, using airplane mode, reducing your screen brightness, switching off 4G, mobile data, wireless, and keeping your phone warm, to name a few. The next pillar of our navigation is direction. Now, you may be able to walk in the right direction through purely your description. If you've got a detailed description of what's going to happen over your leg, you make that description happen, well, you've gone in the right direction. But occasionally you need a little extra help, and we're going to look at that just now. In winter, many features are covered by snow, and you will rely more on the accuracy of your bearing to travel from A to B. Sometimes your destination isn't a distinct point, and you need to rely that your bearing has taken you to exactly the right place. Make sure you've practiced in summer so your bearings are accurate. Remember, it's not just accuracy of walking on your bearing, but also of taking the bearing from the map. In summer, when walking on a bearing, you typically sight on objects. You line up your compass, you look for something in the line of your compass, and you walk to it, and then repeat. linking these objects to keep you straight. Sometimes in winter, when it's pure white out and the snow has covered all those features, that's just impossible. And you need to, what we call dead reckon, where you're literally just walking with your compass out in front of you, trying to travel in a straight line. Now this is really difficult and sometimes unachievable in like strong crosswinds, as you can crab and move sideways as well as forwards along your bearing. A top method for countering this and trying to help in these situations is to get in a line with another navigator, and the navigator behind can constantly give you feedback as to whether you're still in line with their bearing or whether you're starting to drift downhill or downwind. Again, distance, another pillar of navigation, is often managed through your description. If you have a series of events that are coming up in your leg and they all happen, you've gone the correct distance. Occasionally we need more help, and this next section will look at that. Description is a great way of measuring distance because it doesn't rely on any calculation. It's super quick and off you go. Timing and pacing, on the other hand, require skill to be useful. In winter, often the end of your leg, there's nothing distinct there, so your time ticking over or the last pace happening has to be the catching feature that tells you you're there. And for that to be useful for you, it's got to be really, really accurate and really well practiced. Altimeters are also another great tool in winter, and let's have a look at them in a bit more detail now. The two most useful functions of an altimeter are your rate of ascent and your altitude reading. The rate of ascent is probably the most useful tool, as it's unaffected by weather and it doesn't need calibrated. You use it for timing in the vertical plane. In this example, you can see the skier needs to ascend 630 meters. If they're skinning at 10 meters a minute, then you can see that's going to take 63 minutes. The great thing about using this as a timing tool is you can zigzag as much as you want without affecting the timing, as long as you're maintaining your vertical ascent. This is really good for your heart rate, as it keeps you at a constant workload all the way up the climb. The altitude reading needs calibrated regularly and can be wildly out, especially in the changeable weather we see in Scotland. It's often more useful in descent, especially on skis, as the time period is shorter and it gives the watch less time to become decalibrated. The last pillar of our navigation is design. Design is how you put together each leg to make it easy or simple to travel from A to B. In summer, this element's often neglected, but in winter, it's essential for successful navigation. On skis, manipulating the design will often allow you to have more fun skiing. Handrails are a great design element for managing your direction. In summer, you might use paths, streams and walls. In winter, these things are often covered by snow, and you'll need to use elements such as a changing gradient or a feature like a ridge that will guide you in the direction you want to travel. Design your leg with a decent catching feature. These are things like a changing aspect of slope, a changing gradient, could also be your timing and pacing or an altimeter. They're effectively alarm clocks that tell you to stop. You've reached the end of your leg. If your journey requires you to find something awkward, such as the top of a ridge or the entrance to a gully that's going to guide your way safely down the hill, use an attack point. An attack point's a much easier thing to spot that's close to the difficult feature. It's often something that sticks up, like a cairn in this example, that you can easily navigate to, but crucially it's close to the difficult to find feature, such as the ridge. Then you can be really precise over a very short distance to make sure you don't miss your key feature. In this example, we are aiming to find the Tor at point 1122. Let's say in poor visibility we're following a bearing along the dashed line to find the Tor, and we get to the change in aspect where the slope starts to drop away from us and we know we should be there, but there's no Tor. Have we gone too far to the left or too far to the right? Help, we're stuck. This is where aiming off comes in. If we deliberately set our bearing to the left, for example here, when the ground starts dropping away from us, we know that we're to the left of the Tor, even if we've had a bit of error, and we can simply turn right and walk along and find it. Even better, we could use the re-entrant marked by the orange line rather than walking on a bearing to simplify things further. The example here of travelling from the north to the south summits of Benahuron near Craigmeggy has been the scene of a number of accidents over the years. You can see that if you simply draw a straight line from the two summits on the map, it initially looks like it's pretty achievable, but in reality it takes you just over the corniced edge of a corrie. In this photograph you can see the consequence if you do fall through that cornice. You're instantly into grade 1 terrain, tumbling down through little cliffs and steep slopes. Not a good idea. Here's a couple of design elements that can help us in this situation. First off, boxing. We can set our bearing as normal, but before we start walking, turn up 90 degrees and walk for a set distance. In this example, 100 meters. Then we can follow our bearing for the distance and we initially wanted to, and then correcting by turning the 90 degrees back and heading in to the end of our leg. Another design element that can help us in this situation is a dog leg. Instead of our original bearing, we pick a point in the middle of our leg that's away from any danger. Be aware that this point is often quite vague, and you need to be really confident in your ability to walk on a bearing and your timing or pacing to make sure you stop in the right place to give your second leg the accuracy it needs to find your final destination. Our approach to the design of our leg might vary dependent on a number of factors. It could vary dependent on whether you have good visibility or poor visibility, the avalanche situation, the method of travel that you're using. In this example, a mountaineer might travel from A to B quite confidently in a descending traverse on a bearing, but a skier would really struggle as their skis are sliding sideways or carving uphill. So instead, they might choose to skin until they're vertically above their final destination. Then they can enjoy a nice even set of turns on the way down to point B. To develop your navigational skills, you must be willing to practice. Practice in the forest on orienteering maps. You get tons of legs done in a short space of time, and the woods simulate poor visibility. Practice in the mountains, as only there does the weather and conditions really start to influence your methods and systems. Always start in familiar terrain and good visibility, eventually working towards unfamiliar terrain in poor visibility as and when your navigation is proving reliable. Remember, navigation isn't always difficult. Often the weather's good and we can rely on the base of our description without adding in too many layers of backup. Don't overload yourself unnecessarily with layers of security. This will only slow you down and leave you with a headache. After all, few of us go into the hills with the goal of having a good day's navigation. Instead our goals are often to enjoy our surroundings, to get stuck into that climb or find that elusive powder. This lecture will inevitably have left you with a few questions and areas that you wish to develop, so make sure you chat to your instructor and they'll help you move forward in these areas.